So it was a byproduct of trying to help out in Uganda. That's really how it began. And so I found myself equipping leaders, and it just kept growing. It turned into other opportunities. I wound up speaking at my denomination's International Fellowship, the Alliance World Fellowship.
Okay.
And that led to people from those streams inviting me to come and speak.
This is Sheila's Take, a podcast where you can hear my take on everything: love, hate, relationships, family, and today's issues with a godly perspective. I'm your host, Sheila Dunbar. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me today on Sheila's Take as I welcome Reverend Dr. David Chotka, a renowned spiritual leader and the founder and director of Spirit Equip Ministries. Dr. Chotka also serves as the chair of the Alliance Pray Team, a ministry dedicated to fostering prayer, equipping resources, and leading events across the Christian and Missionary Alliance Canada movement and beyond. As a Canadian director of the College of Prayer Canada, Reverend David has worked tirelessly to deepen ministries of intercession by collaborating with diverse denominations. Welcome, Reverend David Dr. Chotka. How are
Thank
you?
you. I'm very well, thanks very much. And how's the weather in Pennsylvania?
It was stormy a little bit, but now it's just cold. But
Okay, yeah. Well,
expect
we're in the
that.
same weather. I just live in the Great Lakes Basin too, so yeah, it's just about the same.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. At least we don't have snow yet, so that's a good thing. Exactly. So let's jump right in it. Can you tell me or tell us more about your Spirit Equip Ministries and what its mission is?
Sure. Actually, I've been doing it for years and years and years as a volunteer in my denomination. So that's what that APT thing is, the Alliance Pray Team. And I have traveled across the earth to different Christian Missionary Alliance fields. The Alliance this is an interesting thing, founded by a Canadian who went to New York and became well known there. Which tends to be the pathway for all things Canadian. We will have some good idea and the American will market it and make it succeed. Anyway, our movement has spread to 84 nations, and we have international workers in some of the least reached fields across the planet.
Okay.
And so I began by trying to help the international workers who belong to my denomination. And I would travel to various fields and trying to help them out, et cetera, et cetera. And in the course of time, I found myself writing a book. And that was because I made a commitment in my church to work with actually a New York-based church and an Atlanta-based church to help out in Uganda. And while we were there in Uganda, helping to help people who'd survived through going 20 years of war without any education or healthcare or anything like that.
Wow, okay.
We came alongside them to try and help them rebuild. And in the process, I found myself drafting a manuscript to try and train the pastors who I was meeting. I was training 750 to 1,000 pastors once a year for 3 consecutive years. We did it over a week, and it was called the College of Prayer. And so what we would do is I actually gave the book to them because I wanted them to have a training tool. And in the course of time, it got published in the United States and Canada. So it was a byproduct of trying to help out in Uganda. That's really how it began. And so I found myself equipping leaders, and it just kept growing. It turned into other opportunities. I wound up speaking at my denomination's International Fellowship, the Alliance World Fellowship.
Okay.
And that led to people from those streams inviting me to come and speak. And the next thing you know, I'm traveling. So I did that as a local church pastor. And then my district superintendent, which would be like a bishop in other traditions, looked at me and he said, "If I can find a way to get you paid, would you write and would you travel and do this for the rest of your days?" I said, "If you can get me paid, I'll give it some consideration." And good as his word, he got that done. Yes. So the result was that I found myself developing resources and training and traveling, meeting people, offering Zoom courses, working with church boards as a consultant, trying to help. And actually, it's become trans-denominational. I've spoken with Methodists and Episcopalians and Anglicans and Baptists and Presbyterians and Pentecostals and Mennonites. And you name the gamut, I have spoken there. Wow. I've spoken in 17 different nations.
Wow. That's amazing. That is amazing. So let's talk about your book, The Healing Prayer.
Yes. What would you like to know about the book?
Let's tell me about it. Let's talk about it. It's your book. Let's talk about it.
Well, it's a book. It's a co-write, actually. I didn't just write this myself.
Mm-hmm.
I became great friends with somebody who helped me with my first book. Let me see if I got a copy of my first book kicking around here. I do not, which is, oh, here, just a minute. Here's the first book I wrote. It's called Power Praying. This is the one that I gave to the Ugandans.
Okay.
And the intention behind this was to train them in the principles that are found inside the Lord's Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And when the day was done, the guy who wrote the foreword, a guy named Maxie Dunham, became my great friend. It started in 2008 when I asked him to consider writing the foreword to this book. And the way I met him was a miraculous act of power. I mean, the guy was internationally renowned. He was the head of Worldwide Evangelical, Fellowship for Methodists. And
Mm-hmm.
he was the head of Asbury Theological Seminary. And I was a lowly plebe from Canada. Sitting in my office one day, and a large publishing house expressed interest in the book. And I was delighted with that. And it looked like it was going to happen. It kept getting put off and kept getting put off and kept getting put off. And eventually they wrote me a note and said, "We're sorry, we can't publish your book." And I said, "Oh, tell me, why can't you do it? Is there some defect in the manuscript? Do I need to improve something?" And they said, "Oh, no, that's not that at all." And so I said, "What's the reason you're not publishing my book?" And the guy looked really embarrassed. And then he said, "Well, number one, your church is less than 3,000. All I had at that point was 1,200. Okay, my church is less than 3,000. Number two, you're not American. And number three, you're not famous."
Wow.
So, I mean, I was whining about that. I said, "What do I need to do?" And he said, "You need to find a million seller in the prayer tradition who would write the foreword to your book."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Yes, that way his constituency would give consideration to your book and make sure it's in the same stream. It has to be a prayer author."
Okay.
Well, I knew million sellers in evangelism, and I knew million sellers in systematic theology.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd studied with a world-class New Testament scholar, but I didn't know anybody in the prayer tradition. So I remember whining for about 2 weeks. I was, every time somebody would say, "How you doing?" I'd say, "Not good." They'd say, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm not American." "Oh, by the way, my church is less than 3,000. I'm not famous." Anytime somebody would ask me, I'd say that crazy thing. Anyway, in the course of time, my wife looked at me and she said, "David," I said, "Yes." She said, "Isn't that book about prayer?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Have you prayed about this?"
Well, hello. See?
And I said, no, I haven't done. And she said, "You might want to give prayerful consideration to talking to the Lord about this."
Wow.
So I went into the office, and I had staff in the office, and I said, "Look, I'm going in my office down the hall. I'm putting on the do not disturb. I don't want anybody walking in on me. I need 3 hours all to myself. I need to talk to God." So I spent the first hour whining. It's called the prayer of lament, but that's just another word for whining.
Why?
So at the end of the hour, I started actually to sense the presence of the Lord. I felt peace rising in my soul.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, "Lord, I am not American. I'm not famous. My church is only 1,200. That's all I've got. 5 services on a weekend. It keeps me running. Thank you very much." And so in the middle of this, I sensed an increase in his presence. And then bubbling up from my spirit came these words: "Call Maxie Dunham." He's written, you don't know this background, but Maxie has written a million seller in prayer. It's called The Workbook of Living Prayer. It sold 1 million copies in the United States. Anyway, so I didn't know that, but I just heard this word: "Call Maxie Dunham, ask him to write the foreword. He will help you." So what I did was I had a 300-page manuscript back in the days when there was not the auto feed on the photocopier, right? Anyway, here's what I did. I argued with the Lord for about 45 minutes. And then finally I said, "I'm going to look the guy up." And I didn't know him, but I'd read 7 of his books. I walked over to the computer. I Googled his name. He was at Asbury Seminary as the president. And I thought, "Oh, okay, that's kind of neat. He's not going to pay any attention to a guy he's never met before." And I felt this prompting just the same. And I typed in a little note. So I got the phone number. I called Asbury Seminary. I got his secretary. I said, "May I speak to Maxie Dunham?" And she said, "Well, he has just left the office. You just missed him by minutes." And I thought, "Oh, rats, the Lord was telling me for an hour I should do this. I missed the office." So she said, "Why are you calling?" I said, "I wanted to talk to Maxie about a manuscript." And the secretary thought I had already published with Maxie.
Oh, really?
So she gave me his contact info, and I wrote an email. It was very, how do I say this? It was warm and, inviting and all that kind of thing. And I talked about the value of 7 of his books. I read 7 of them. and all the impact that it had. And I pressed send. And then I thought to myself, David R. Chotka, you've just spent the whole morning and you sent an email. That's what you've done. That's what you've done with your day. Some stranger, right? And so I just forgot about it, went back to my work. I went about, and then there was a ding on my computer, and it was him saying, I have 2 days, 2 weeks from now, I'm traveling internationally. I will get back. And if you can get that manuscript to me for those 2 days, I will read your manuscript. And I thought, wow. So so here's what I did. I went and I got the 300 pages and I copied it 1 page at a time.
Wow.
I didn't have an auto feed in my photocopier. Then I went down to Canada Post, and to go across the border was expensive. So I paid $57.27 to overnight that package to him at Asbury Theological Center.
Wow.
And then I thought to myself, you just spent $57.27 to overnight package. The guy doesn't know you from a hole in the ground. He's the leader of all things Methodist across the planet. He's going to be polite and nod his head and say, thank you very much. Nice manuscript. Nothing's going to happen. So I just forgot about it. And 2 weeks later, I was going on a hospital visit on the ring road around the city of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I was driving around the road. I had my first cell phone. There were no distracting driving laws at that point.
Yeah.
And it was a flip phone, and I'm a Star Trek fan. Live long and prosper. So anyway, the phone rang, and I flipped my thing, and I said, hello, this is David Chotka. And this southern voice speaks, and it says, hello, David, this is Maxie Dunham. And then he said this phrase, God has commanded me to make you successful.
Wow.
I have read your manuscript. It's excellent. And I do believe that the Lord would have me write the foreword to your book, or perhaps I could co-write the book with you. And he says this beautiful thing. And I just about lose control of the vehicle. I understand now why distracted driving legislation has been enacted in many states across the United States and in Canada. Anyway, I did manage to keep the car under control. And good as his word, he wrote the foreword to that book. And of course, it created a profile. It raises your profile when somebody well-known puts their name on the book. Anyway, that began this. And so began a friendship that has been over the miles. And he became the second reader of my doctoral thesis. I visited him in his home. I've been with his wife and I've got to know some of his family. And he introduced me to his best friend, who was the first discernment author in human history. And the result was that I did my doctoral thesis in prayerful discernment, and I interviewed his best friend to become my discernment author focus. And so then I wrote another book by myself with Maxie's coaching. And then it turned into this opportunity to examine things. And then in the course of time, this opportunity came from my district, and I called Maxie up and I said, Maxie, I need help in publishing. Would you co-write something with me? We both had a brochure on healing prayer. And what happened was he had come to 2 of my churches to teach. And so he had a brochure with him, as I had a brochure with me. I was teaching my intercessors what it felt like when you knew the anointing of the Spirit was on you. And he had developed a brochure for what to do at the altar when your intercessors are there giving pastoral care to pray for them when they're about to receive prayer for healing. And the theology was identical, but the practices were different.
Right.
And so we made the decision that we would overlap those 2. We produced a little book. And then last December, this is the craziest thing. We published that little book. It was 50 odd pages. It wasn't much of writing, but Whitaker House read it. And so I had just talked to Maxie, and I said, Maxie, our book's too small. We need to expand that book so it's more comprehensive. And he said, yes, we need to do that. And we started to write healing stories and to swap them with each other. When Whitaker House called and said, we'd like to pick up your book. Can you expand it so it's about 200 pages? And so we did. So this is the book that came out of that. It's called Healing Prayer, God's Idea for Restoring Body, Mind, and Spirit. And the reason why we wrote it is because lots of churches don't know how to pray for healing. Or they have people who are very willing to pray, but haven't been trained. Don't know how to be pastorally sensitive when somebody's dealing with a life-controlling problem, or they're dealing with some terrible diagnosis they receive from some doctor. And what we do in the book is we give basic teaching. And what we do is we teach healing on 5 levels. We teach that there's what's called the instant cure. And there's accounts in there of miraculous healing. And for the record, I was miraculously cured of a paralyzed face. I had Ramsay Hunt syndrome.
Wow.
I was told at 53 I'd never speak again.
Really?
And my whole face is paralyzed. And there was a lady in my church who prayed for me. And the story's long, but when the day was done, she fasted, she prayed, she got a word, she told me the word, and over the course of the next 3 weeks, the Lord miraculously healed my face. I
Wow.
have a doctor's note to say it's medically impossible.
Wow. Look at
And my
God. Look at
wife was genetically transformed from muscular dystrophy. She had muscular dystrophy. And that Ugandan bishop who organized that school of prayer back in Uganda was flown into my church, and as he was preaching about the war in Uganda and people praying through the war to save people's lives, he was stopped mid-sentence. And the church was packed. We're talking absolutely, totally, completely packed. The building sat about 400. There were 650 people in that sanctuary, up against the walls and right down the aisles. And I was sitting on the steps to get up to the pulpit because there were no seats left for me, and my wife was 2 from the front. And he looks, and this particular form of muscular dystrophy, it meant that you could not raise your arms higher than this, and your stomach muscles and your back muscles begin to hollow out. And if you damage a muscle, you lose it, and you wind up in a wheelchair. You don't die young, but you die greatly afflicted. My wife had that thing. It's called FSH, facioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy. That's what it's called. Her mother has it. Her sister has it. Her niece has it. She had it. And all of them were suffering with the effects of this. And when I married the girl, her mother barely made it down the aisle because she wanted to try to walk, and I knew that the future was going to be just that. Anyway, here's what happened. It's a plateau decline disease. And I was sitting in the church, and my wife had lost a lot of ground through the birth of our son. And then secondly, she lost a lot of ground because the disease has a plateau and then rapid decline, and then a plateau and a rapid decline. And she'd had 3 of those. She was walking with canes, and it was going to switch over. We were going to get rid of the steps in her house, sell her house, and get a new house because she couldn't go up and down the stairs. It was really hard. Anyway, here's what happened. She had not raised her hands above her shoulders for more than 20 years. This Ugandan bishop is telling us stories about what happened in the middle of that war when all these intercessors were praying against the awful madman Joseph Kony and against Idi Amin. And he's telling these incredible stories, and everybody's sitting on the edge of their seats. And we had 3 services on a weekend. And the Saturday nighters came to 9:20, and the 9:20ers came to the 11 o'clock, and it's 11 o'clock, and it's hyper filled. And all their friends are there from other churches because they want to hear this amazing guy. And he's telling a war story and stops dead in his tracks. And he hasn't reached the climax of the story, and everybody's waiting. And he looked down at me with his Ugandan accent, and he said, David, what is M.A.?
Oh.
I thought, M.A. Master of Arts. I don't know. So
Right?
he said, no, I got something wrong. And he put his head in the pulpit, and he waited. Now, that room was packed.
Wow.
So that long time, it was probably a minute, but it felt like 2 years. You know what I'm saying? He was waiting. So then he looked up and he said this. It's a wasting muscle disease. Whoever has this, it starts in your head and causes your face to sag. It causes your shoulders to slump. Your shoulder blades go out of position. Between 16 and 20, you get into chronic pain. You can't lift your shoulders higher than your arms higher than your shoulders. You lose muscle tissue. And if you lose it, if you damage muscle tissue, you lose it forever. And he gave a perfect, magnificently medical description of my wife's FSH muscular dystrophy. And then he said this, whoever has this, Jesus has just healed you. Woo. And right while I was looking at my wife, her arms went above her head for the first time in more than 2 decades. And all her friends were sitting around her, looking at her doing this. And some of them had been in our home to help her clean because she couldn't move the couch or vacuum properly because of the lack of mobility. They had come on to help, and they watched her lift her arms above her head. And then when we were to go home, we had company because people were coming to see whether or not they were going to go to Uganda with us for the next trip. And so we had pots and pans to bring down, and the plan was that she would get to the kitchen. I would bring down the heavy pots and pans from the top shelves so that she could start to cook and prepare for all the people who we were hosting. She pushed me out of the way, climbed the things herself, and brought down the heavy pots and pans.
Really?
And a week later, she ran up the stairs as she was disciplining her daughter. So our doctor knew us. We'd been there 5 years in that town. Same doctor for 5 years. He watched her, and 3 years after she was healed, he wrote the medical note saying that all symptoms of muscular dystrophy have vanished from her body, and she grew.
Really?
Yes. So hearing a story like that, so I told that story to Maxie, and he and I realized we needed to share stories like that and
Yeah,
teach people
yeah.
how to do prayer for healing. And so we wrote the book to help churches. First of all, we talk about something called the instant heal. That's one of those stories in the book. We
Mm-hmm.
talk about natural healing, where you cut your finger and it bleeds and you clean it off, you put a bandage on it, it heals with
Mm-hmm.
it. We talk about the Lord guiding you in a pathway to a remedy. And guidance from the Lord to a pathway to a remedy is just as powerful as the instant heal, because somebody's done 20 years of research and invented a cure. And if you are led to that by Jesus of Nazareth, you should take the cure.
That's right.
Okay, then we talk about seasons of bearing with suffering, where God gives you grace. And we talk about the miraculous crossover at the end of your days, filled with the anticipation of your reward, dying to be in his presence. And all five of those overlap. There are seasons where some instant heal occurs and you're given a pathway to a remedy. Sometimes you're given a pathway to a remedy while you endure the pain. And then suddenly in the middle of that, you're given partial cure and you're given natural healing. Sometimes natural healing begins and then suddenly there's a miraculous cure. And sometimes as you are on the path to your final destination, you discover that grace is given to you to bear with your affliction. And then the presence of the Lord gets rich inside the room. And the next thing you know, you're talking to Jesus of Nazareth. And
Wow.
all five of those are outlined in the book.
And the healing prayer.
Yes, all five of them there. And I'll just be clear with you. Majoring on one of those to the exclusion of the others is a mistake. In scripture, you do not see any conflict between any of them, and all of them are part of the package. My favorite story is the story of the healing of Hezekiah, king of Judah. It's in Isaiah 38 and it's in 2 Kings. I
Yeah.
love the story because it's got everything in it. It starts off with Isaiah showing up and telling Hezekiah, one of the good guy kings from Judah, he's done, he's finished, he's toast, he's dead. Get your house in order, it's finished. Hezekiah faces the wall and he cries out to God, and he doesn't even say, heal me. He says, remember what I've done for your people.
Mm-hmm.
And then Isaiah, the great prophet who wrote 66 chapters of prophecy, he's walking out. God zaps him and tells him to go back and tell him he's got 15 more years.
Yeah.
So then Isaiah goes back. This is the second prophecy. He says, oh, by the way, you got 15 more years. Hezekiah nods his head and then he says, prove it. He says, what do you want? You want the shadow to go this way or you want the shadow to go the other way?
Yeah.
He wants a nature miracle. And so Isaiah says, what do you want? He says, listen, going down is easy. Coming back, that's hard. I want you to give me the shadow going back 10 steps. So Isaiah the prophet cries out and the shadow moves backward. He gets a nature miracle.
Yeah.
And then when he's done, he looks at the king and he says, oh, by the way, get yourself a fig poultice, put the fig poultice on top of the boil and suck the poison out. You'll be fine. He gets a miracle, 2 prophetic utterances. He gets this crazy prayer. He gets the earth-shaking miracle where the shadow is reversed, and then he's told to take his medicine.
Wow.
So it's this no conflict between medicine and miracle, none. And scripture teaches very clearly that all 5 of those are intrinsic to the healing process.
Wow. 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 You know something, Reverend David? I had a whole bunch of different questions to ask you, and I just got mesmerized. Because I got so mesmerized by your stories telling about your books, and I had a whole nother direction to go in. So I thank you for that. Oh my goodness.
Oh, you're welcome. I can come back and do another one if you'd like.
We're gonna have to, because I didn't get a chance to ask all my questions.
Okay, well, that's fine with me.
Oh my goodness. But let me ask you this. How does it fit with the different denominations that you're working with? I mean, how are you received? Are you received well? Because
your
you
question is an important one, because there are, now listen, right now as we speak, there are hundreds of denominational traditions that accept prayer for healing. In fact, the one that I'm in, the Christian Missionary Alliance, has it as an article of faith. And so we believe in something called the fourfold gospel, that Jesus is the Savior, the Sanctifier, the Healer, and the coming King. And that's because the founder of the CMA was dramatically healed of emphysema and a lung condition when he was a young man. And he was so robustly, profoundly healed. He traveled the planet in the 19th century He climbed mountain passes and preached in Tibet, if you can get that. I mean, we're in Mongolia. He planted a church in Mongolia. And so this is an amazing kind of story. So the tradition I am in has embraced this. But I will tell you that many CMA congregations have head knowledge of prayer for healing, but haven't been trained in how to listen to the signals that are in the heart. And that's the reason why I wrote the book. Now, there are some traditions that believe that God doesn't do it anymore. And in those cases, well, they don't invite me.
Right. Well,
There are other ones that have what I call a hyper spiritualized understanding of prayer for healing, and they eliminate the suffering principle. And I live smack dab in the middle. I do believe that we're already participating in the powers of the next age, but we're not yet as we should be. So I guess the best way to do this is to point people to the scripture. So in the book of Galatians, it's very interesting to see this. If you look in Galatians chapter 3, Paul talks about how the Galatians had tossed away justification by grace through faith and substituted something called works righteousness. But in the middle of it, he says, tell me, did he who sends you the Spirit and worked miracles among you do so by hearing with faith or by works? I mean, he actually says that when he planted the church in Galatia, signs and wonders happened.
Right.
Okay, now the other part is in chapter 4, we find out how he planted the church. Do you know how he planted the church? He got sick. And he got so sick.
Yeah.
Strangers had to give care to him.
Yeah.
And so he fell among strangers, and he was so sick he couldn't take care of himself. And in the middle of his lament about how the church had gone sideways, he says to them in chapter 4, I remember when you cared for me and it wasn't a burden to you, and you would even pluck your own eyes out for me. And I was so sick, but it's the same time when he's planting the church. So here's what it means. Sick Paul was being cared for by the Galatians, who were given care for him while he was preaching to them, and they were being healed by miracles. So the sick guy is getting people sick while he's healing in the ordinary way. So when I point that out, and I can show you the scriptures, one's in chapter 3, where it talks about the power, signs, and wonders around verse 4 and 5. And the other's in chapter 4, where he laments about how he just, what's gone wrong with you guys? Didn't we have a great relationship? You cared for me when I was sick, and you would have plucked your eyes out. And he actually talks about how ill he was, and it was terrible. And were it not for Paul getting sick, the Galatians would never have been healed by faith. You got to know, that's weird.
Yeah.
At any rate, it's really summarized in how the New Testament hangs together. The best way to describe how the New Testament hangs together is found in 1 John chapter 3, verse 2. It says, Beloved, now we are children of God, but does not yet appear what we shall be. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him just as he is. So now we're saved, but we're not yet as we should be. And the whole New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, all the way through to Revelation, has that already not yet tension built into the thing. It's from start to finish. The center of the New Testament is the already not yet, already participating in grace, not yet fully sanctified, not yet as we should be, not yet fully healed. And the ages overlap. And when I teach that framework, the eyes of people from every denominational tradition light up.
Well, you see mine. You see, because I'm like, what? All right.
So that framework. So listen, the Protestant reformers just rediscovered justification by grace through faith. So if you read the writings of Martin Luther and you read the writings of John Calvin, and many people are schooled in the streams of those two great reformers, they will say the center of the Bible has to be getting saved. It has to be justification by grace through faith. The trouble is, there's only 2 chapters in the entire book of Romans on justification, and it's there as an illustration of unity between Jews and Gentiles. And there's only 2 chapters on justification by grace through faith in Galatians, and the rest of the New Testament doesn't mention it. That means it can't be the center. It's important enough to be 4 chapters of the New Testament in the center of Paul's magnificent epistle to the Romans, and I love it, and I need to be saved, and you need to be saved, and everybody else out there needs to be saved. But the overlapping ages, the already not yet, is in Matthew and Mark and Luke and John and Acts and Romans and 1 and 2 Corinthians and Galatians and Ephesians and Philippians, all the way through to the book of Revelation. It's everywhere. All over the New Testament. You see the down payment of the Spirit and the anticipation of the resurrection of the dead at the end of time. And it's clear the language refers to a down payment where the Holy Spirit enters you and causes you to experience a new birth, where you begin to participate in the powers of the next age. But, oh, you know this and I know this. I am broken and bent, and you are broken and bent.
Yeah. Yes.
And even when you wake up in the morning with a really, really, really good decision to do the right thing, you'll get tired and roll over in bed and forget. Or you'll sin by not doing it. You'll know you're supposed to, and you won't, because you're just fed up with the person you're supposed to do the good thing to. Well, you don't want to forgive that jerk over there because he's been mean to you and he hurt your daughter, that kind of thing. And you got this interference because the world is fallen and broken.
Yeah.
Paul even says it in Romans 8. He says, oh, man, even we who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we groan within ourselves, waiting eagerly for our adoption as sons, the buying back of our physical bodies.
Yeah.
He wants a body that's not going to incline him to weakness or sin or sickness or whatever. And I'll tell you something, the older I get, the more I'm looking forward to that body. I want my teeth straight. I want my eyes to work well. I want my back to be good. And I'd like my hair back. Thank you very much. That's what I want.
Well, you know what, Reverend Doctor, I thank you for being a guest on my show today. And I have one last question for you.
Sure.
What are you grateful for?
Oh, listen, I have so much to be thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus healed me. Jesus healed my wife, my son, my daughter. 4 of us in my family. 4 of us have been healed. That's amazing. Mm. And I am thankful for the mentoring of many, many fine mentors. I was given to study with Dr. Gordon Fee. He taught me about spirit. And Dr. John White, who's the founder of the InterVarsity in Latin America. Now my co-writer, Maxie Dunham. These mentors have poured into me. I don't deserve it. I just don't deserve it. I'm thankful for the grace that saves. And I am thankful for opportunity to be able to talk about the power of Jesus.
Yes.
Anytime I can. And actually, to be on programs like yours, where the possibility of speaking to people I've never met before, to hear about things that Jesus is doing, that's an amazing thing. And I'm thankful for that. So, I mean, I have 1,000 things I'm thankful for. So what are you thankful for?
I am thankful. I say this all the time. I'm thankful for just waking up this morning, because there are so many people who have not done that. I'm thankful that I'm able to get down on my knees and give God glory. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for my circle of friends. And I am thankful that God gave me the courage to do this podcast. He put this in my spirit for such a long time, and I was afraid to do it until someone told me, do it afraid. And that's what I started doing.
Okay.
And again, it's gotten me to places where I'm able to meet lovely, wonderful people like yourself and inspire others that may or may not know the glory of God and the things that He's capable of, and how He's in our lives and through it, up, down, and He leads us.
Yes, He does.
And He gives us grace and He gives us mercy every day.
Now, I've written a book on being guided. I don't know if you knew that.
You did?
I did. I'll show it to you so you can see it. Here's the book here. It's a 5-day-a-week resource. It's called Hey, Are You There? It's Me, God. How to Listen, Test, and Know When God Speaks. And Jack Canfield, the storyteller from Chicken Soup, he wrote the foreword.
Wow.
He read the book and liked it because it's full of stories. It's full of stories about people hearing the voice of Jesus.
Wow.
And what I do in the book is I give 25 different ways that people hear the voice of Jesus. And at the end of the book, I put it together into a grid that you can use to test out whether or not you're hearing what the Lord is saying to you. So that's the other book I wrote. That was in
Hey,
20.
are you there? It's me, God.
This one's
Listen,
only on Amazon. The other one you can get anywhere
you
books are
get
sold.
anywhere. Do you
Yeah.
have a website? Tell my
Yes, I do. It's
website.
www.spirit, like Holy Spirit, and
Mhm.
equip like equipment. So put those two words together, spiritequip.com. And people can reach me by going to david@spiritequip.com, and I will respond to your email. And I do conferences, I do events. If you wanted to invite me, I'm happy to come.
Thank you. So please go out and get healing prayer. Hey God, it's me, right?
Hey, you're there. It's me, God.
Hey God.
Or actually, go to Google and just enter my name, Chotka, Chotka. There aren't very many of those in Canada or the United States, and you'll find that you'll be driven to several of my books. So I have 5 on the market.
Thank you so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate you, Reverend Dr. David Chotka, and I will definitely have you back because, like I said, I wasn't able to answer the questions I wanted to ask. Like we went a whole different way, but you know what? That's God. God leads you. You got to follow. And
Absolutely.
I thank you so much. You are a joy, and please keep doing what you're doing. I
You
appreciate
betcha, sister. It's great to meet you.
Join me next time where I will continue to discuss more of today's issues. I'm your host, Sheila Dunbar. Blessings to you.